Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us. I'm Barclay Hagan, the Director of Client Care for OnPoint, and this morning we have Linda Whitener, who's going to show best practice closing procedures in Spectrum. If you have any questions, please enter them into the question section of the GoToWebinar control panel, and we'll have some time at the end of the presentation to address those. With that, I'm going to hand it over to you, Linda.
Thank you, Barclay. Yes, my name is Linda Whitener, and we'll go through this PowerPoint presentation of the best practice for closing the month end in Spectrum. And this time it's a little bit different. I'm going to stay mainly in this PowerPoint. It has some snippets, and then it also has the pathways just for the time sake because we just have the 30 minutes. But if there's something specific that anybody needs, I'll be happy to go into the software. And also, if you have any questions further, you can always email us and we'll be happy to schedule a meeting with you to go through your specific needs. So the main learning objective is to learn how to close the month in Spectrum. So just an overview, it's mainly to close the months, and so it's driven by the minimum and maximum processing dates, and each module has its own date, and you can close it from the module or from one specific place, and I'll show you that as we go along in there. So when we start closing, of course, we want all of the transactions to be updated, because if some transactions aren't updated in a particular module, you're never going to get it to balance with the subsidiary ledger or anything like that. And so we want to make sure that there's no additional transactions that are also going to need to be entered. If there is, we can always very easily open that month again and get them entered, but then any reports you've run, you'd have to rerun those. Then also each module has its own module specific trial balance, and you can just run those and look for the exceptions. And then we want to, of course, balance the subsidiary modules with their associated GL accounts. Then we can print and archive the period end reports, archiving those for the historical purpose. If you'd misplaced the paper copy, we can show that we had this report and it was in balance at the time that we did the closing. So for the unposted GL transactions, and so meaning that's anything coming from any module into the GL, we want to make sure that everything is posted. And the very simple way that Spectrum has to find that is that we go to the general ledger, and you'll see this is the path to get to that. The general ledger, inquiries, and then to unposted transactions. And then you can enter a through date. So this was in some sample data that I had, but entering everything or entering the date, let's say we're in August now, so you're closing through July 31 of 2021. That's the date that you would put in. And I believe I have a snippet here. So you can do all modules or a specific module, and the transaction date is through the month that you're closing. And then by putting the checkbox there, you're saying only show me the stuff that has unposted transactions. And so then you won't get a whole list of stuff that has a 0 count. It's only showing you those that need to get posted. So, and also from this screen, you could highlight on the accounts receivable, invoices, and credit memos. You could highlight that and click the update button, and it will take you directly over to accounts receivable to post those invoices and credit memos, and take you all the way through that process. And then when you're back here, you could refresh, and then that line would go away once it's posted. So these are the transactions out there from every module up to the date that you specified. So we want to get all of those posted. So the processing dates that we spoke about earlier, it's the controlling the data going into the general ledger period. So again, through the end of July, you'd want to, once everything is posted, you want to close that period so that nobody else can make any entry to it, because you don't want to be reconciling a moving target. So we make sure everything is posted, then we close it, and then we can start printing out our reports. And where the main processing dates are located, it's in the system admin, which is at the very bottom of your listing. And then at the very top of the next listing is installation, and then it's the first one and it's processing dates. And you can set the minimum and maximum posting dates. And also it has a current date on there, and the current date cannot be further or a newer date than the maximum date for that particular module. So most of the time, I always went in and I just moved them all at one time, but you can do them separately. And so, for instance, if you have, you're still working on getting your invoices in for a particular month, but you need to move that maximum date out so that you can run checks in the next month. You can do it and open up the next month just for that one module if you wanted to. So having a tight control on that, prevents transactions from being posted to older closed periods or even bogus future periods, so that you can't accidentally key in 22, 21 or something like that, and have to worry about reversing that then. So it will keep everything within a tight time frame. So what that screen looks like is here. So it lists all your modules that you would have, and it lists your current date, the minimum date, and then the maximum date. So minimum, for the most part in here, is January 1 of 20. And again, this is sample data. So, and then the maximum date is pretty much May 30th of 2020. And the actual current date is January 15th. So if we needed to change, look at inventory control. If it's actually not in May, and we're coming up in June, and we're some date in June, I would have to change the maximum date of May 30 to be like June 30. Then I could come back and change the current date to some date in June. But most of the time, people have the minimum date, the difference between the minimum and the maximum date might be 2 months. It'd be the month that you're working in and the next month. They allow those 2 months to be open. And so you just kind of move it along those month at a time with that span. So now we're going to look at each module and what should be done for the month-end balancing. In accounts payable, go into that inquiry that we looked at previously, general ledger, inquiries, unposted transactions, and you want to verify that everything for AP up through the month that you're closing has been posted. So again, that's one thing you're going to see repeated on each one of the different modules that I'm going through, but you can do it all at one time. So if you do that all at one time, then the next step, controlling your processing dates, if you did those all at one time to say, you know, that month that you're closing, we'd use the date of July 31st. If I make the minimum date, then August 1st, I can do that all the way down that list on the processing dates because all of my transactions are posted. So let's just move the minimum date on everything, and then I don't have to go revisit it every time when I go into another module. So then in accounts payable specifically, there's accounts payable, you go to period end, and then there's a report called trial balance. So you can run this report for exceptions only. And so as long as there's no exceptions, then you can move on. But if there are exceptions, it says contact support, because what the exceptions could be is that the transactions don't match the master file, what's on the vendor. There was a disconnect somewhere along the line, so it takes some special kind of help to get those back in line. Then the next report is the in general ledger reports trial balance. Here it says to print the trial balance in summary for AP, AP retainage, and subcontracts payable if you have separate ones for all of those for the current period. Again, this is another one that you could print the entire trial balance, have it there for your reference so you don't have to go back and print it when you do AR and job costs. You just print it one time for this particular month, and then you have it. Then, of course, you want to run your aged payables report to make sure that it balances to the GL account for your payables, the ones on that trial balance that it was talking about previously. One thing that you want to do when you're trying to balance to the previous month, it's a little bit different than just printing, hey, what's out there now? What do I owe people? And I want to pay some people. You just run it then. But when you're going backwards to balance to a previous month, you need to check the box, include paid invoices, because you're giving it a previous cutoff date. But if you don't tell it to include paid invoices, anything that's paid since then, it is not going to put it on there, so you won't balance. So that's the only little thing that's different on there. And then you want to verify that the GL trial balance agreed with the aged payables report. If you're out of balance, one of the first things to look at in general ledger, if you do an inquiry, it's a detailed analysis, look for transactions that originated from a source other than accounts payable, the main one being a general ledger journal entry. Because let's say if your CPA gave you a journal entry to make, but then maybe you didn't reverse it back out and it was just an accrual, it's going to put you off by that amount. So when you're doing a detailed analysis inquiry in general ledger, you can go up to the upper left hand corner and there's a preferences button, and you can unselect accounts payable invoices and accounts payable checks and let it show you everything else and see if anything pops up there. So in accounts receivable, the first two items are the same ones that we had talked about before. You do them one time and you're done with them. Then in accounts receivable, you would do the period end, do the trial balance, make sure that there's no exceptions. You would have already had your general ledger trial balance printed out from earlier. Then you would do your aged open items. Sorry, it's not aged payables, it's the open items for your receivables. And make sure to include that include paid invoices checkbox on that report also. And then again, make sure that it's in agreement with the trial balance. And then if you are out of balance, you do the same kind of thing that you did in accounts payable. Check for anything that did not come from accounts receivable. In payroll, again, there's the first two things would already be done. Go to period end, trial balance, confirm that there's no exceptions. And then there's also a history trial balance, confirm that there's no exceptions on that report. Then the one thing in payroll, there's under period end, there's a period end clear. So Spectrum being a little bit different here, we're controlling and closing our months by doing the processing date thing. And so it's not officially like rolling and clearing out the month to date buckets. So this is one place, if you have any reports that are looking for, or not reports, it's the deductions or add-ons with monthly limits, then you would definitely have to do this period end clear. If you don't have anything that's working off of monthly limits, it's not really necessary. It's just, if you want to keep those so that if you do any reports, it would be accurate for the month and for the quarter. But it's not mandatory if you're not using those two things. In job cost, so there is somewhat of an order to how we close, because job cost receiving stuff from accounts payable and accounts receivable and payroll, we want to make sure that those modules are closed first and everything has been sent on its way to collect in job cost and in general ledger. So we do those first. Then we're down to doing the unposted transactions. That's one of those first things that should have already been done. And then in job cost under data entry, the projected cost. So you would have to say to build this projected cost first, and it would be on your open jobs. And then the project managers can go in and update this projected cost. And that appears on reports when you choose to use projected cost instead of the revised estimate. So then we're back to the trial balance, which you should already have from general ledger, and it would be showing the direct job cost. And then in job cost under period end, there's a cost type summary report. So it would list by cost type how much dollars are on the jobs by those cost types. And you'd want to make sure that it agrees to the general ledger for the GL accounts that are tied to those cost types. And then there is also a contract status report. And it says here when you're running it at month end to select the link to create earned revenue entries checkbox. If you want to do that, it would create the file to send these earned revenue entries to be updated. So by job, it records those and creates that file automatically. And then lastly here, it had the job cost, the minimum and maximum dates. And on here, because it's down towards the end, is because you're doing a couple of things in job cost, the projected cost, that are making entries. And so job costs, you really can't move those minimum dates until you've done the stuff here in job cost. In cash management, again, it's after you've worked up accounts payable, accounts receivable, and payroll. Because there might be things that would be going to cash management. And so that we want to make sure everything is over here from all the other modules. So then there's the inquiries on unposted transactions. Then you would want to do your bank reconciliation and credit card reconciliations to make sure that you have your interest charges in there, anything that was missed, that would need to go back to be put in. And so we want to get those two reconciliations done, and then we can close it, cash management, by going to the processing dates. And lastly, there's general ledger. So you want to confirm that all the other modules have been closed for the period. Then we can look at unposted transactions, doing your trial balance in a summary form, and then just making sure that the debits and the credits equal. Then there's a monthly activity balance report, and make sure that in each of those columns it comes down to 0. And then, because that would mean your debits and credits are equal. And then if there's any recurring entries that you have, you can set up recurring entries for like depreciation, any insurance accruals that you have to do. We can set those up as recurring, and then we don't have to re-enter all of them all the time. We can just do the posting of the recurring entries. Then if you just have some little journal entries that need to be done just for this month, and then if there's any of journal entries or the recurring entries that need to be reversed, then you want to take care of the reversing entries. So after all of that's done, then you'd want to go on to print your financial statements. And so those do need to be designed first. And then, so the design is under the maintenance item, and then the printing of them is under the reports. Then only at year end is there the one item that you have to do, and that's opening forward balance update. So again, like I had said before, it's a little bit different than some other softwares. When you close the month, it's rolling buckets and stuff. This is just doing that part of the procedure. It's rolling the buckets. It zeroes out your income statement. It adds that dollar amount to your retained earnings, and it rolls it forward. So until you do this opening forward balance update, let's say for 2021, until you do that, 2022 does not have any beginning balances yet. So you don't have to do it right away, but just knowing when you're looking at 2022, it doesn't have any of the beginning balance. And so that's mainly just on your balance sheet accounts. The income statement accounts, they always start out with 0 anyhow. And then under system administration, the installation, the processing dates to roll those dates forward. And with that, that has gone through all of the main core modules, how to close those and what reports to run. So in recap, we went through detailed month-end procedures, and we definitely looked at the processing dates, where they are, and when to close them. And one thing I forgot to mention on that, because we always referenced going to system admin installation processing dates, you will also see a link to rolling the processing dates within each module. Under period end, there is a link to processing dates. It does not look the same as it is under system admin, but you can get to it from either place. But when you're in the module, you're only looking at the one date for that particular module. So that's why I always preferred looking at it, the whole thing. I can always, whenever I'm in there, double check on all of the modules to know and to make sure where they are at with their dates. So with that, I'll give it back to Barclay. And it was a pleasure, and I hope you got something out of this session, and we're always here to help.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you all for attending. If you'd like additional information or if you have ideas of other topics you'd like to see covered, we're here to help. Contact us at 877-213-3860 or clientcare@onpoint-software.com. Also, to keep up to date on new resources and upcoming events, you can follow us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And everybody have a great day. Thank you.